Story 1. The cold winter wind nipped at my cheeks as I stepped out of my car and walked up the front steps of my new house. I set down the box labeled kitchen and fished the keys out of my pocket, hands shaking slightly from equal parts chill and excitement. After slotting the right key into the deadbolt, I turned the knob and pushed open the heavy wooden door. Stepping inside, I was greeted by empty walls and the smell of fresh paint. Sunlight filtered in through bare windows to fall on scuffed hardwood floors. This blank canvas was all mine. After years of hard work and saving every extra penny, I had finally achieved my dream of moving out on my own at 24 years old. Growing up as the youngest of 4 kids, I constantly craved time alone. Solitude was a rare luxury in our cramped and chaotic household. The noise of siblings bickering, mom yelling upstairs, dad cheering at the TV always provided a constant backdrop. As much as I loved my family, their presence was exhausting. So I began plotting my escape early on, taking after-school jobs as soon as I was old enough. I squirreled away every bit of income I could, picturing the small fortress of peace I would build one day. Through college, I stuck to my frugal ways even as friends splurged on restaurants and spring break trips. Their envy at my discipline made the sacrifices worthwhile. And now here I stood, a high school dropout turned accountant, gazing around the empty living room of my very own house. It wasn't huge or glamorous, but the 3-bedroom suburban rental suited me perfectly. No longer would I have to battle for control of the TV remote or schedule my shower time around everyone else's. At last I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. Over the next few weeks, I gradually settled into a comfortable new routine. Mornings were spent sipping coffee on the back porch, watching birds flit around the yard. Evenings found me sprawled out with a book in the blissful quiet. I took my time grocery shopping and cooking dinner, not fighting for counter space. And best of all, when I was done interacting with people all day at the office, I came home to blessed solitude. My family, who lived just 20 minutes away, worried I would be lonely on my own, but I reassured them I was happier than ever before. Most weekends, I reveled in the simple luxury of sleeping until noon and lazing around in pajamas without anyone judging me. This newfound freedom and independence was everything I had fantasized about. One frigid February night, I was in my bedroom watching videos after a long work week. Wind howled outside, making the old house creak and groan. Curled under a blanket with my cat snoozing beside me, I felt a sense of contentment. Around 11 p.m., a sudden loud banging on the front door made me flinch. My pulse spiked at the unexpected noise, shattering the peace. I muted my phone and waited nervously for the sound to repeat, wondering if I had imagined it. But 5 minutes later, more loud pounding proved I wasn't hearing things. Unease flooded my body. I couldn't imagine who would be trying to get in this late at night during a storm. The rational part of my brain said to call 911 just to be safe. But instead, foolishly trusting my gut instinct, I crept downstairs to investigate. Peering out the window beside the door revealed a bulky figure dressed all in black looming on the front steps. I staggered back, heart dropping into my stomach. The menacing form looked like something from a horror movie come to life. When my door rattled under the force of the man trying to break in, I realized no authorities would arrive fast enough to stop him. Backing away on trembling legs, I retrieved the handgun from my bedroom closet just as the glass pane on the door splintered. Heavy boots clumped up the stairs toward where I waited with the pistol aimed forward. My hands were slick with sweat, but I kept my cool. As the shadowy intruder barreled into view, I fired without hesitation. 3 muffled cracks rang out, echoing my ears. The man screamed and grasped his bloody torso before staggering away. I stood frozen in place, even after his wailing faded, unable to process what had just happened. Only when red and blue lights flashed outside did I snap back to reality. But by then, the wounded man was long gone. Talking with the police while paramedics checked me for shock, I recounted every detail, still struggling to believe it was real. The officers speculated it was likely a botched robbery attempt on the wrong house. They applauded my quick reflexes in defending myself. After that night, my landlord replaced the damaged front door with an iron-reinforced one and installed a high-tech security system. I'd also bought heavier window locks and extra lights to deter future incidents, but an ominous unease still lingered whenever I was home alone. For weeks, I slept poorly, constantly imagining sinister eyes watching me from dark corners. A creaking floorboard or rustling tree branch left me jumpy and on edge. I even considered moving back home, where I had always felt sheltered and safe. But in time, the traumatic memories faded to eerie dreams and flashes of recollection, rather than consuming my waking hours. I reminded myself of how hard I had worked to get here. One awful night wouldn't ruin everything. Now I make sure to lock my bedroom door each night and keep the pistol close by for security. I refuse to relinquish this long-held dream of independence and privacy out of fear. The encounter left scars, but it also gave me strength and resilience I never knew I possessed. Instead of dread when I come home to the empty house, I feel pride that I reclaimed my sanctuary, and I'm reminded how our struggles shape us. I won't take this freedom for granted anymore. The next time trouble darkens my door, I will open it bravely, confident that the light will prevail. The darkness will not dim my spirit again. Story 2. The Cabin in the Woods. The end of spring semester finally arrived. I had powered through my exams and submitted my last research paper. My anxiousness about grades was replaced with excitement for summer break. I couldn't wait to get out of the cramped dorms and noisy roommates. A much-needed change of scenery was ahead. My dad had promised I could spend the first month of vacation at his new log cabin out in the countryside. Ever since I was little, he had dreamed of owning a secluded retreat in the mountains. Now that dream had become a reality. As a writer, my dad found inspiration in nature and solitude. He had amassed quite a following writing creepy stories over the years. His books about cabins in the woods were always fan favorites. I never thought much about the dark tales. I just knew reading made him happy. When he called to share the news that he'd purchased a real log cabin, I couldn't have been more thrilled for him. My dad deserved this idyllic new home after everything he'd endured. Losing my mom to cancer 5 years earlier had shattered him. Moving forward felt impossible for the longest time. But lately his voice held a spark whenever we talked. The cabin symbolized a positive new chapter. I could already picture the floor-to-ceiling windows framing lush forest views and the sprawling front porch perfect for reading. As I hauled my suitcase across the tiny dorm room, my friend James sat on his bed watching me pack. "Have fun getting murdered in your dad's new cabin," he teased. I rolled my eyes dramatically. "You know houses made of logs don't actually attract serial killers, right?" James laughed. Yeah, I know. But are you sure it's not weird that your horror writer dad bought a cabin in the middle of nowhere? That sounds like the beginning of every scary movie. It's just a cute house in the mountains, not some creepy haunted mansion, I argued, flinging a sock at his head. We joked around imagining all the ways things could go wrong, from axe-wielding maniacs to rabid wildlife. By the end, I was eager to escape the stale dorm air and get on the road. James made me promise to text him. I was alive once in a while, so he didn't send out a search party. With a quick hug goodbye, I headed outside and got into the waiting Uber. The drive to the airport went quickly. Before I knew it, I was boarding the plane that would take me to my dad's new home state. I watched wispy clouds drift by beneath the wing, daydreaming about adventures we would have this summer. Fishing, hiking to waterfalls, stargazing around a campfire. Stepping off the plane, I scanned the busy terminal for my dad's familiar face. I spotted him leaning against a pillar, nose buried in a book. He glanced up as I approached, his expression morphing into a grin. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen him look so light and carefree. On the drive to the cabin, scenic mountain vistas soared around each bend. Dad enthusiastically pointed out local wildlife like hawks gliding overhead. His smile grew wider the farther we ventured from the airport and deeper into untamed wilderness. An unpaved road branched off the highway leading to our secluded destination. The SUV jostled over the uneven terrain, sending my stomach flip-flopping. Trees enclosed us like a living tunnel. I understood why Dad described the area as middle of nowhere and his enthusiastic late-night calls updating me on the move. When we finally pulled up to the cabin, my jaw dropped in awe. It was nestled harmoniously amongst the towering pines, almost like it had grown there naturally over time. A quaint covered porch wrapped around the first floor. In the fading golden light, the whole scene looked like a postcard. The inside was just as charming yet surprisingly modern. Vaulted ceilings soared over the great room anchored by an imposing stone fireplace. All the wooden surfaces had a polished glow that felt warm and welcoming. As we ate takeout on the couch that first night, I saw my old dad emerge once more. He enthusiastically detailed which rooms would become his writing nook and my artwork studio. The familiar passion rekindled in his eyes lifted my spirits higher than I'd felt in years. I settled easily into a comfortable routine over the next few days. Mid-mornings were devoted to reading out on the porch swing tucked beside fragrant lavender bushes. Evenings brought glowing sunsets viewed from Adirondack chairs around a crackling fire pit. Growing up, my dad had prioritized memorable experiences over material things. Simple joys like exploring tide pools or stargazing had shaped my childhood into a wondrous adventure. The cabin evoked that same feeling of wonder I thought had faded with age. Each day presented a new discovery. A glistening waterfall tucked off a winding trail, juicy wild blackberries peeking from the underbrush. About a week after my arrival, we got an unexpected visitor. A county sheriff's truck came bumping up the dirt road one sunny afternoon. My dad and I were reclined in the chairs on the front porch reading when we heard the rumbling engine approach. The sheriff tipped his hat and greeted us politely as he stepped out of the mud-spattered vehicle. His face looked grim. "Sorry to bother you folks, but we've got a situation and wanted to give everyone in the area a heads up," he explained, his weathered voice edged with concern. He went on to describe how a hiker had been found mauled to death by what appeared to be a bear several miles up the mountain. They were organizing search teams to find the dangerous animal before anyone else got hurt. But he cautioned us to stay vigilant in case the bear roamed closer to town. My dad calmly thanked him for the warning and said we'd be careful. But as soon as the sheriff drove off, he hurried inside and returned wielding his rifle. I stared at the weapon uneasily. Just days ago, the most dangerous thing in these quiet woods had been thorny brambles to avoid on our hikes. "I'm sure that bear is long gone, but better safe than sorry," Dad reasoned, leaning the gun by the front door. I nodded uncertainly. He had taught me to shoot cans off a log years earlier at his insistence. I prayed those skills wouldn't need reviving. The next few days proceeded uneventfully. If anything, the forest seemed quieter as wildlife took cover to avoid the roaming predator. My dad eventually tucked the rifle away in his closet again. By the end of the second week, the mauling had faded to a cautionary tale unlikely to repeat itself. A rare rainy afternoon kept us housebound one Saturday. I was engrossed in a novel when I heard my dad shout excitedly from the living room. I wandered in to find out what had sparked such a reaction. He stood smiling with the phone pressed to his ear. "A date? I don't know. I'm pretty rusty on the whole whining and dining thing," he joked to the mystery caller. My eyes widened in surprise as I realized what was happening. When he hung up, Dad explained his book editor Rebecca had asked him out to dinner that evening. A mix of emotions swirled through me. It had been ages since he last dated, but the idea also felt strangely foreign. In my mind, Mom was still his one and only. Sensing my apprehension, Dad enveloped me in a comforting hug. "It's just a casual dinner with a friend, nothing serious." "But it felt nice to be asked," he said softly, his expression hopeful yet tinged with guilt. "You'll be okay for a few hours on your own." "Of course, you deserve to have some fun," I blurted out, pushing aside any reservations. He had spent so long in mourning. How could I deny him a chance to remember what living felt like? After a flurry of wardrobe changes and fashion debates, Dad rushed out the door looking more stylish than I was used to. As he backed his SUV down the muddy driveway, an unexpected uneasiness crept over me. Something about being alone in the isolated cabin at night put my nerves on edge. I distracted myself by baking chocolate chip cookies, letting the smell of gooey sweetness overwhelm the silent rooms. but even music and books couldn't hold my attention for long. I cleaned the entire kitchen just for something to occupy my restless hands. Dad checked in periodically, assuring me he was having a great time, but would leave soon. I tried to keep the worry out of my voice, not wanting to cut his evening short. After all, nothing sinister lurked outside, just my overactive imagination. As daylight faded to darkness, I couldn't shake the jittery feeling something was out there watching. I repeatedly checked the sturdy deadbolt on the front door and shuttered all the windows, but shadows seemed to creep in anyway. I decided to try getting some sleep rather than stressing myself out more while awaiting Dad's return. As I lay in bed struggling to quiet my thoughts, exhaustion eventually pulled me under. Vivid scenes flickered through hazy dreams. A twisted forest path, heavy breathing reverberating off trees, glowing eyes following my every move. A sudden crash jolted me upright. I clutched the covers, heart hammering against my ribs. Had that noise been part of my nightmare or something real? I listened intently, but heard only eerie silence. Slipping out of bed, I crept to the window and peeked outside. The moonlit yard appeared empty. I was about to write it off as my imagination when a loud bang echoed up from downstairs. Someone, or something, was inside the cabin. I froze momentarily, unsure what to do. As more chaotic noises arose, I shook off the paralyzing fear. Frantically, I rifled through my dad's dresser until my fingers closed around the smooth metal barrel of his rifle. After checking it was loaded, I tiptoed into the hallway with the gun aimed warily ahead. A chorus of grunts and snarls reverberated from the first floor, mingled with crashing furniture. My hands quivered gently as I descended the stairs, heart lodged firmly in my throat. The living room looked like the site of a derailed train, furniture overturned, belongings scattered violently across the floor. Amidst the debris stood the culprit. Shaggy brown fur rippling over hulking shoulders confirmed my worst fear. The deadly bear from weeks earlier had found us. Maybe it had caught our scent, or simply wandered astray in its relentless search for food. As I stood frozen on the bottom step, it turned directly toward me, coal black eyes reflecting no light. Before I could react, the bear charged full force in my direction. On instinct, I fired the rifle, but the shots went wild. The blasts barely slowed the bear's momentum before it was at the bottom of the stairs, swiping a hefty paw at my leg. I shrieked and raced back up to the second floor, managing to slam my bedroom door shut. But the thin wood wouldn't be enough for the barrier. I could hear the bear thundering up the stairs, its hot breath exhaling loudly. Gripped with terror, I fired more useless shots through the closed door until the useless clicking informed me I was out of ammo. I was trapped. In desperation, I ran to the balcony connected to my room that looked over the back lawn. I leaped over the railing just as the bear demolished the fragile door. Pain seared through my right leg as I hit the ground hard. My vision blurred before everything went black. Beams of sunlight warming my face pulled me back to consciousness. I blinked groggily at the unfamiliar room, trying to get my bearings. That's when I noticed the hospital bed and Ivy lying snaking under the blankets. Dad sat slumped in a chair next to me. His wrinkled shirt and days-old stubble told me he had been keeping vigil by my bedside. Relief flooded his expression as he realized I was awake. He recounted how forest rangers had tracked the bear to our cabin after a neighbor reported strange noises. They found me passed out with a severely broken leg, but managed to contain the bear before it did worse damage. I was lucky to only have minor injuries. As I processed the traumatic events, tears spilled down my cheeks. Dad leaned over the bed and cradled me like he had when I was small and afraid of monsters under the bed. "You're safe now," he repeated gently until I drifted off again. Recovery was slow and painful. My mind constantly replayed those minutes of terror when it seemed unlikely I'd survive. Weeks passed before I could sleep through the night without nightmares of teeth and claws emerging from the dark. Dad patiently sat with me after panic attacks and flashbacks gripped me. The look of helplessness on his face made me feel guilty for derailing his newfound happiness. Once I was back on my feet, he announced we were moving again. I protested at first, not wanting to be the reason he abandoned this long-held dream. But Dad insisted starting fresh elsewhere would be better for us both. The memories etched into the ruined cabin would make it impossible to feel at peace there again. We said goodbye to the mountainous views and tranquil woods. Sometimes I missed drinking coffee on the porch steps while mist rose over the valley. But the new apartment felt like the right place to begin rebuilding and moving forward. After the ordeal, Dad shelved plans for his next horror novel. "I think I'll try something lighter for a change," he mused during our movie nights on the couch. I knew then that we really had left the darkness behind us in that cabin. Though faded with time, the scars would always remind me to face my fears, but never let them define me. Story 3. It was a sunny Saturday morning in late August when I first met Liam. I had just finished unpacking the last box in my new apartment after moving in the day before. It was my first time living completely on my own, and I was excited to start this new chapter in my life. As I collapsed the final cardboard box and carried it down to the recycling area, I saw a large moving truck parked in the lot next to my little sedan. A tall, muscular guy around my age was unloading furniture and boxes onto a dolly. Next to him stood a petite brunette who looked bored as she scrolled through her phone. I nodded and smiled as I passed by, wanting to give a friendly first impression to my new neighbors. The guy immediately stopped what he was doing and came over to introduce himself. "Hey there, I'm Liam, your new neighbor in 2B, and this lovely lady over there is my girlfriend, Kara," he said, flashing a grin. Karen glanced up from her phone and gave me a quick once-over before turning her attention back to the screen. Liam and I chatted for a few minutes about the building and the neighborhood. He was very friendly and outgoing, asking me questions about where I moved from and what I did for work. As we talked, Kara let out an exaggerated huff and started taking boxes up to their apartment. Liam said we should continue our conversation later and headed back to the truck. I got in my car and left for the day, making a mental note that my new neighbor seemed nice, if not a little overly chatty. Over the next few weeks, I ran into Liam frequently as we came and went from our apartments on the second floor. He always had a big smile for me and would try to make small talk in the hallway or elevator. Kara was never with him during these interactions. I only saw her a handful of times, usually as she was getting into or out of her car in the parking lot. She didn't smile or acknowledge me when we passed each other. Liam explained that Kara worked a lot of night shifts as a nurse, so that's why I rarely saw her around. I figured that explained her unfriendly demeanor. She was probably just exhausted from long hours at the hospital. One night in early October, I was cuddled up watching a movie with my boyfriend, James. He had come over straight from work, still dressed in his suit and tie. We were cozied up on the couch enjoying a rare night in together, when suddenly we heard shouting coming from the other side of my living room wall. Liam's muffled voice was soon joined by Kara's shrill one. The argument escalated into loud banging noises like items being slammed and thrown against the wall. At one point, I thought I heard glass shatter. James immediately hit mute on the TV and looked at me with concern. "Should we call someone?" he asked nervously. I had no idea how to handle the situation. The fighting continued as we discussed whether to get involved. After a particularly loud smash, James had enough. He went out on the balcony connected to my living room, which joined up with Liam and Kara's. "Hey, everything okay over there?" he shouted. The noise paused briefly. Then the balcony door slid open. "We're fine, sorry to bother you," Kara called back in a tone that conveyed this interaction was over. The door slid shut once more. James and I looked at each other uneasily. "Do you think we should call the police?" I whispered. He hesitated before answering. "Let's just go to bed for now and hope it was a one-time thing. But if it happens again, we're definitely calling," James decided. His law career made him wary of jumping to conclusions or accusing neighbors of domestic violence without evidence. I agreed reluctantly. The rest of the night was quiet, but I had trouble falling asleep. The next evening, I came home late after drinks with coworkers. James had plans with friends, so I was on my own. As I got ready for bed, exhausted from socializing, I heard angry voices through the shared wall once more. This time the argument was one-sided. Liam was yelling while Kara cried. Again, bangs and crashes punctuated his shouting. My heart pounded and I froze, unsure what to do. In my sleepy state, I convinced myself things would be fine until morning. I turned on some music to drown out the sounds of fighting and managed to doze off eventually. When I woke the next day, I felt ashamed for not calling the police. But it was too late now, so I resolved to keep an eye out for any concerning behavior from my neighbors going forward. I needed to stay vigilant in case things escalated further. Over the next couple of weeks, I rarely saw Liam or Kara coming or going. The gloomy fall weather meant I wasn't spending much time on my balcony where I might run into them. I assumed they must be avoiding each other during some kind of cooling off period after their fights. Then, on an unusually warm Saturday in late October, I was sitting outside reading a book. It was a rare nice day, so I wanted to take advantage. I had settled into the comfy patio chair facing away from Liam's unit, lost in the pages of my novel. Suddenly, I felt a tap on my shoulder that made me jump. I turned to see Liam looming over me with an unsettling intense look in his eyes. "Hey there, Missy," he said in a low voice. "Got a minute to chat?" My heart started racing nervously. I hadn't heard Liam come onto the balcony. Since my back was to his apartment, I gave him a tight smile. "I'm sure, what's up?" I answered politely as I subtly pulled my robe close and crossed my arms over my chest. Liam casually informed me it was his birthday and he was wondering if I could help him find some weed to celebrate. He added with a smirk that he figured I was the type to know where to get good stuff. I tensed up even more, completely taken aback by the request. Our state had legalized marijuana, but Liam was basically asking me, someone he barely knew, to find him drugs late on a Saturday. I tried to diffuse the uncomfortable situation with humor. "I'm sure Google could point you to some dispensaries that are open," I said lightly and forced a laugh. Liam didn't seem amused. He switched topics abruptly, telling me about how he'd been out drinking heavily the night before. As he rambled about the crazy party, a creeping sense of unease came over me. Finally, he offhandedly mentioned having tapped my car in the parking lot on his way home last night. But he was laughing as he said it, like he found the drunk hit and run hilarious. I stood up quickly. "Hey, I better get going. Let me know if you left a note with your insurance info," I said briskly. I just desperately wanted to get away from him. "Don't worry, I'll leave it on your door tonight," Liam replied with a smirk. He seemed chillingly unconcerned about the property damage and potential crime. I rushed inside, locking the balcony door behind me. My hands were shaking slightly as the adrenaline wore off. Liam's behavior had been incredibly unnerving and worrisome. After taking some deep breaths to calm myself, I headed to the parking lot to survey the damage. Just as Liam had described, the driver's side door of my car now had 2 long scrapes marring the paint. I took photos to document the vandalism before returning to the safety of my apartment. The next day was uneventful, but I couldn't stop thinking about that encounter with Liam. The way he singled me out on the balcony and cavalierly admitted to hitting my car gave me an ominous feeling. I decided to start keeping pepper spray on me whenever I left my apartment, just in case. That night, as I got ready for bed, I thought I heard Liam's voice out on the balcony again. I paused, listening closely with my heart in my throat, but then I realized it was just my imagination heightened by anxiety. I firmly closed the curtains and double-checked that the door was locked before crawling into bed. My cat snuggled up beside me, and her warm presence was comforting. I fell into a restless sleep. The next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by aggressive pounding on my front door and a voice yelling, "Open up, it's the police." Terrified someone had called to complain about a noise disturbance. I leaped out of bed and hurried to the door. As soon as I opened it, I found myself face to face with 6 uniformed officers. Before I could react, they pushed into my apartment with their guns aimed warily in front of them. My heart dropped into my stomach when I realized this was way more serious than a noise complaint. The lead officer quickly explained they needed access to my balcony connected to Liam's. Still disoriented from sleep, I struggled to process what was happening. The officer informed me Liam had barricaded himself in his apartment with a gun after violently assaulting his girlfriend, Kara. She was currently in critical condition at the hospital. In a daze, I led the armed officers through my place to the balcony. As they strategized how to get into Liam's unit, I locked myself in my bedroom, trembling. I could only make out muffled snippets of the scene unfolding right next door. It felt like an eternity before there was a knock at my door signaling it was over. The officers had managed to arrest Liam and remove him from the building without any shots fired. They escorted me back to the living room to take my statement. I recounted the arguments James and I had overheard that led to my uneasiness about Liam. The police praised me for reporting the incidents and providing assistance. After they left, I sat on the couch in shock, trying to process everything that had happened. In the following days, I was on edge constantly, afraid Liam could come back seeking revenge on me. I flinched at every noise in the hallway or parking lot, dreading that I would run into him again. Late one night, as I was returning home from a friend's house, my worst fear came true. Liam appeared out of nowhere right as I got out of my car. "We need to talk," he said through gritted teeth, coming toward me. I recoiled instinctively and managed to slip through the closing elevator doors away from him. My hands shook as I hurried to get inside my apartment. Liam knew where I lived and could show up again anytime. I felt completely unsafe. A few weeks later, I spotted Liam smoking behind the building. He again tried to approach me asking why I betrayed him. I quickly explained the police had pressured me into letting them use my balcony before rushing away. I decided then that I had to move out. Liam clearly had not forgiven me for my role in his arrest. That night, he left an ominous note on my balcony with his number saying, "I'm counting on you." It reinforced my decision to get as far away from him as possible. I broke my knees thoroughly and crashed on a friend's couch until I could find a new place. The police increased patrols around my old building, but said there was little else they could do without additional evidence of Liam breaking his restraining order. I managed to pack up and get out without another run-in with Liam, but the experience left me rattled and paranoid for months. I took self-defense classes, got pepper spray for my keychain, and was wary of new neighbors. One day, I worked up the courage to call the county jail and learned Liam was back in custody awaiting trial for his latest domestic violence charges. I finally felt like I could breathe again, knowing he was off the streets and unable to come after me. My time living next to Liam was the scariest experience of my life, but it taught me to trust my instincts and speak up if someone's behavior seems dangerous. As I settled into my new apartment on the other side of town, I promised myself I would never ignore red flags like that again, even if it seems easier or less confrontable in the moment. I couldn't let fear or uncertainty stop me from staying vigilant. It was too high a price to pay.